So the story about this show coincides with a publication that will be out in 2022, early 2022. So if you're interested, you can look it up then. It's called 3 Women Artists, Expanding Abstract Expressionism in the American West. It's with Texas A&M Press. My co-author, Bonnie Roos, some of you probably had her in class. She's a professor of English and art history at WT. She's also one of my best friends and a brilliant writer. And I'm the person that loves to dig in the archives. So we made a great team on writing this book. I think it's going to be something that we're proud of. But what I'm really, really proud of right now is that if you look around on the walls, you can see the art that we did all this research on. So what you're looking at here is a collection of art that is connected. One of the things that we're really interested in our research and in WT's research is pointing out regional connections beyond the regional area. We know we're isolated. You don't have to tell us that. But guess what? We are networked to so many places. So I'm going to take a second and plug something else because I'm up here and I have a dang mic. But one of the places we're networked to is the Southwest. And John Rivette is standing here with me, and we are putting together a heck of a show on Southwest modernism by an artist named Emil Bistrom at the Panhandle Plains Museum opening next month. So one of the things I'm super excited about is that we have art openings again, and that we have art hanging in the museum with humans in the museum again. And who knows if we'll shut down before then, but let's pray that we won't. And so my point here is networking, right? It takes us only 4 or 5 hours to get to the Southwest. Now it takes longer to get to New York, but all the women that you see on the wall were travelers. They moved around in space. They were in their studios in New York City, they were in their studios in the Hamptons or wherever, but they did not hesitate to get on a plane and get out here. And one of the things that they did when they were out here is they met people, they taught classes, they found patrons, they bought cowboy hats, they participated in cow chip throwing contests, they ate prairie oysters without knowing what they were. And so this idea of our area as tourism, our area as an allure for anybody that wants to experience Texas. And that's what this story is about. So if you read the wall labels, each of these women had a story to tell about their space and our space. Behind me, one of the women, okay, back up a second, sorry. The book that we focused on was about 3 women. The 3 women that we picked to highlight in our book were the 3 women who spent the most time on the ground out here. That is Elaine de Kooning, Louise Nevelson, and Jeanne Reynaud. Now, Louise Nevelson is probably the most famous of the 3. Elaine de Kooning is quite famous because she has a super famous husband. And Jeanne Reynaud you've probably never heard of. Now, Elaine, you'll see all through this exhibit, the bull paintings, the giant colored bull paintings, those are hers. She started painting bulls when she was teaching at UNM, remember the Southwest networking I was just talking about, and she would go down to Juarez, Mexico with her friends almost every weekend, drink, party, and look at bulls. And she painted them. Sounds like fun, let's go, right? Okay, so that's her story. And then Louise Nevelson, you'll see her wall downstairs, large scale. I just graded about 35, I don't know how many students are in her class, final exams today that we tested them on that painting downstairs, or that wall downstairs, because it is part of the canon. Louise Nevelson is famous for these large scale wooden sculptures that are also kind of architecture, that are also kind of painting. Because she found scrap wood, put them together in these large architectural structures that are bigger than my body and your body, and then painted them all black. So it's breaking down that purism that stands for abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism was being dictated, that style was being dictated by the male critics, and Louise didn't care about what label you put on her. She was just going to do her thing. Now, the reason why that piece downstairs is really, really important is because she was having trouble getting sales in New York City. And one of the sales that she made that turned the corner in her career, and she's now a blue chip artist, meaning like one of those pieces is, I'm not even gonna tell you how much, Google it. But she turned the corner in her career because people here met her took classes from her. She came out here in 1960 to be part of a show, and they did a raffle to make money to buy $5,822.56 or something like this, right? So they got a discount. It was $6,000, but at that time that was big money, and that could last her a year. So she made her first big turning point sale in Amarillo, and we still have the piece. So all these stories tell us how important the connections between our area and these women who were New Yorkers are. Now the woman behind me, Jean Reynal, I picked to start here because it's my favorite corner. It's really colorful. Reynal, like I said, least known, but deserves a lot more attention. She's a mosaicist. One of the things about abstract expressionism is that it's painting centric, right? So if you think of ABEX, you think of Jackson Pollock, you think of Mark Rothko, you think of Willem de Kooning. Guess what? They're all painters. Well, Louise Nevelson was part of the group. Jean Reynal was part of the group, but somehow they get written out because double time, they're both sculptors or something other than painters and women. So they're out, right? But one of the things that we learned about Reynal is how central she was. She was hosting people at her house almost every weekend around the corner from the Cedar Bar, which was the ABEX hangout in New York. She was buying Jackson Pollock's first sold painting because she had an estate and she could spend her money on whatever the heck she wanted. And she was also an artist of note. So she is a mosaicist who's doing things like this, and this is our small scale example. But she was working on the floor in large scale mosaics, sprinkling tesserae, just like Jackson Pollock was sprinkling his painting. So there's connections between what we already know about modernism and these women. Let me think what else. Okay, so downstairs, the other thing that's a little bit weird, you'll go downstairs and you see 3 portraits, and there's a man in the middle and women on both sides. And you look to both sides and you say, is that the same woman or not? It is, and the story with that is that the Bivens family, who also founded Amarillo Museum of Art, was big supporters of these women, and yet also highly selective. They said, hey, Elaine, paint a portrait of me and my husband, right? So Mrs. and Mr. Bivens. And she said, sure. And then she painted one of Mrs. Bivens, and they said, not quite right. And so she painted another one of Mrs. Bivens, and she said, not quite right. The third one, I think, is what took. Now, there's some debate about how many dang portraits she painted. But we have 2 downstairs. One because it was in the family, and one because another collector who studied with these women when they were in Amarillo held on to that one. And they're both in this area now. And you can pick the one you like, but it is the same woman, and it is the same artist, but that's why there's 2. What else? So the galleries, the way they're set up, this room in here with the bar, the most important room, not only because of the bar, but also because that's the highlight of the 3 women that we're talking about. You'll see the Bull by Elaine. You'll see Jean Reynal's mosaics, and she did these mosaics in a way that was a little Andy Warhol, like famous people, and she'd do the mosaics of them. Like this person back here is, you might not know who it is, but it's Betty Parsons, who was a New York dealer who was selling Jackson Pollocks and selling all the ABEX artists, but also was just as interested in the women as the men. So it's a little bit of a like, go ladies kind of thing to put her in here. Now, the other side with Louise Nevelson, she started painting gold things after she came here in 1960. Now, you figure out why she went from black and then to white and then came out to Texas for the first time and started painting gold. Is it the golden spread? Is it that we're the yellow city? Is it because she saw gilded faucets in ranch houses? That's what she claimed. But it's something to do with Texas. So that's why we highlighted those gold pieces. And you can go decide if you like them or not, but the New York people in New York did not like them. Maybe they saw them as too gaudy. Maybe they didn't connect. Maybe they weren't angsty enough. I don't know. But our people out here bought them. We have good representations of the gold sculptures. They didn't last long because they were so critiqued in New York, but we have a few of those. So that's that room. This room here is a little bit of the later things. The room over there, a little bit of the earlier things. So if you wanted to go slightly chrono, that's 50s and 60s. This is 70s, 80s. One of the stories we're trying to tell is how long the ABEX movement lasted out here. If you read books on AbX, it was in the 50s, 40s and 50s, and then died. Pop art started. But for the living artists that continued to do their work, they didn't die in the 60s. They lived into the 80s, and so they continued their work. So the longevity is part of the story. You'll see other artists that you might not have heard of, like Jane Wilson and Jane Freilicher. They're in there. They didn't come here in person, but they were represented in the 1960s show that brought Louise Nevelson here. They were friends with all of these artists. They met Texas people when they went to New York, so their presence is important. Linda Lindeberg on the wall in there next to the Franz Klein, she came here for that 1960s show, so she was on the ground. Very, very little known. We need to do a lot more work on her. Then there's super famous people like blue chip artists. We have Helen Frankenthaler, we have Joan Mitchell, I think in the other room, we have Grace Hartigan. All of those women didn't come here in person, but they were major AbX women. We have their pieces for a number of reasons, and they're worth celebrating too. So anyway, I've talked way too long, I'm sure. I want you guys to socialize, but please pay attention to the art. I can answer any questions that you have, and I just cannot thank Sean and the Texas Art Associations that are all thriving for doing what you do. So thank you.